Hey everyone. So welcome to our new series here. Again, this goal of this Quants Worth Following series is to highlight people in the industry who are worth following. So here today we have Clemens Kownatzki. He is the Associate Dean and Assistant Professor of Finance at the Graziadio Business School at Pepperdine University. And Clemens, it is such a pleasure to have you here. My first question for you is, what is your research focus at Pepperdine?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. My research focus is and always has been this weird area of derivatives, in particular, pricing of derivatives, volatility forecasts, option pricing, and so forth. As a former market maker in foreign exchange, commodities, and some derivatives, we always needed to have a good measure of volatility, right? Because that directly affects our cost of our options, of our hedging strategies, and because we want it to be delta neutral at the end of the day. So that's always been kind of my area of expertise. But at the same time, when you're working in the industry, you never have time to do any research. I mean, you're just here to, try and get your systems in order, try and get your strategies in order, and then make money. And so whenever I had a research idea, I had to kind of push it aside. And after many, many years, I had this huge repository of ideas. And I thought, oh my God, I wish I could find time to do that. And then when I transitioned into academia about a little more than a decade ago, so I'm a late start to academia in many ways, but I had this huge repository of questions. And I said, oh my God, I feel like a kid in a candy store now. I need to do research. And it's mostly in the area of financial derivatives, volatility forecast. And, as an option trader, you're taking a look at the world in a very probabilistic way, right? So what's the probability of expirations above the strike price and so forth? And that's kind of been my area of research and activity. And in traditional research in academia, most of the financial data has been daily data, or weekly or monthly data. And now with more technologies and thanks to companies like you, you have a bit of more access to intraday data. And so that again opens up a lot more areas of research. So I've been kind of interested in market microstructures, how returns on a very small scale translate into larger scale returns, and then even more so with volatility forecasts. And then comparing the traditional models like Arch-Garch and realized volatility and implied volatility, kind of comparing those traditional forecast models with some of the more machine learning tools, transformer models, and so forth. So I'm working with some younger, smarter researchers that are a bit more up to date with transformers, but that's kind of been my focus more recently. The only caveat, I don't have enough time. And that's always the big constraint for me.
Amazing. I would love to learn, actually curious about, since you've been a practitioner and you've also been in academia, what are some of the differences in terms of whether that's like just your research goals or day-to-day lifestyle in academia, doing this kind of research in an academic environment versus within like a private company, for example?
Yeah, good question. Again, depending on what type of private company you're with. And I've always worked with kind of a small boutique type market maker and investment firm. And there's basically no time to do research other than what affects your day-to-day operations, what do you need to do to give the traders the tools to be successful. In academia, a lot of times, there's a lot of people who are very good theoretically. And kind of my struggle has been, how do you translate those theories into something that I can apply day to day? So my mind has always been like, okay, whatever I do in terms of research, I always have an angle. How would affect that my trading? How would I translate this great idea into a trading strategy? So I can never think of it just on the beauty of the model or the beauty of the math or whatever the structure is of the model. I always have to think, can I apply this tomorrow? Can I enhance this somehow? And a lot of times, as you go through many of these kind of exercises over the years, you immediately sometimes you say, yeah, that's beautiful, it's great, but it's not going to work. And I'm sure you've, running a hedge fund, I'm sure you've had these experiences as well. Sometimes it's beautiful for the sake of its beauty, but can you implement it and can you make money out of it?
Oh, interesting. I was going to ask about that too. Like, is the goal to find the next Black-Scholes model,
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, honestly, what interests me about finance is not the money. It's never, money can be good or can be bad sometimes. Some years are great, some years are not good. But I think we're all here to find the Holy Grail, if you will, right? So what is this thing that we're all struggling with that We're trying to figure out what the price of something is tomorrow, or what a strategy could result in. And not so much for the gains in dollar terms, but the accolades, or, hey, I've had the strategy and it's working and I win, so to speak, right? So that's always been more interesting for me, at least. Whereas academia can just rest on the notion of that's a beautiful model and the math works out and I'm cool with that. For me, it had to be more. It had to be like, can I do this? Can I implement this? Can I trade this?
Wow, that is such a great answer. It's actually something I've always wondered about, was in the academia field, what do academics work towards? What's this holy grail? What's the end goal here, right? And I think it makes sense that you mentioned these models that are amazing, but then how can we apply this in the real world? Can it have some sort of application out there in the world? Or, is it good in theory and that's about where it stays? And, so that's very interesting to hear that from you. Just another quick question would be, I know that there's a lot of stereotypes associated with both professors and quants, and I'm sure professors in this kind of trading world as well. What are some of the unusual things about your background or your work that people might be surprised to hear about?
Well, something that probably most people are surprised to hear about. I actually came here to study music. I grew up in Europe, and at the time I was, this sounds weird, but I learned how to read music before I learned how to read Word. And so music has always been a big part of my life, upbringing, background. So I always had this musical interest. But at the same time, I also liked math. And in high school, and this probably dates me now, I graduated high school in the early 80s. And so I had these summer jobs because my mom was working for a bank, and I had these summer jobs working in the bank. And the guy of the foreign exchange department somehow took pity on me and just introduced me to it. First time I sat in front of a writer's terminal, and it's the old screen with the green neon kind of letters, and it's like the Matrix movie. It's kind of like that. So before the graphical user interface. But I was so fascinated because the guy was explaining me, these are foreign exchange rates, and this is what drives the price of a currency. And there's way before the euro, so we had Deutschmark, French francs, Swiss franc, all these different currencies. And it was so fascinating to me. And I just love the idea of figuring out, why is something going up? Why is something going down? Right? So that just fascinated me. And so I always thought that the people that I looked at that were very successful, whether it's in business or in finance, had some sort of a creative, innovative angle to them. And so I've always felt like I don't want to shut down my math skills or quant skills and focus entirely on them. I need to have a different angle. So again, long story short, my focus is in finance, but I always have kind of a side show and a side look into the arts, music in particular. Yeah, and that kind of helps me being creative and innovative.
I love that. Speaking of that, is there any career advice that you love to give to your students?
Yeah, so I think generally this old notion of it's not what you know, but who you know still applies. And that's really based on no matter where you are, whether you're the highest CEO or highest paid CEO in the world or not, you're still a human being. And so when people go into an interview, they always think like, I need to get my quant, my math, my technical skills done. And I think that's just, the technical skills are a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient, right? And the interviewer and the people who are interviewing you and want to work with you, the teams that want to work with you, they think about it differently. They think, well, I need to spend 8 hours, maybe 10, 12 hours with this person. It better be a person that I like. And you've interviewed people, I've interviewed people, and I always think like, okay, the necessary condition has to be there. Clearly, they have to be smart, they have to have some skills, but without kind of that social, interactive, engaging, maybe someone who has good humor, somebody who is likable, has good social skills. That's at least as valuable as the technical skills. And I know it's a challenge because to get to the technical skills, you have to spend a lot of time in books and study, and that takes away from your experiences, your friends and your family, and building these social skills. But I still think it's very, very important. And one advice that I always give people, work in a team, sports, playing sports, you understand team dynamics, you understand competitiveness, but you also have that social aspect to how you approach problem solving or working on a project. You can never do anything on your own, right? So you've put teams together. The team spirit and the team effort is really, really important. So my big advice, work on your quant skills, but also work on your social skills.
Absolutely. Thank you for that really amazing advice. And I think that's also amazing coming from a professor who teaches the quant skills as your, as a part of your job description. The social skills maybe aren't a part of the JD, but I'm sure you do a great job as well of, encouraging your students there. So thank you for that amazing advice. I know you're one of the favorite people I like to go to when it comes to books and resources in this industry. Would be curious if you have any kind of recent books, videos, podcasts, newsletters that you've enjoyed.
Yeah, there's a lot. So funny you should ask, because late last year I did kind of a little mini project and I put together my top 100 favorite books in economics and finance. And I'm happy to share that list with you.
Yes.
I can send it to you.
Sounds great. Yeah, send it over to me. I'll make sure to post a link for everyone.
So like I said, too many to mention, but a couple that come to mind is I'm really a big fan of Emmanuel Derman. He's probably one of the first quants on Wall Street. He wrote this book called My Life as a Quant, but he also published a really cool paper called The Young Person's Guide to Pricing and Hedging. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but at the end of the paper, he worked together with Paul Wilmot, who's another famous quant, and he wrote the so-called The Financial Modeler's Manifesto. And I really have to read this to you because I think it's so instructive for young developers, for young quants and people in the finance area. So let me read the Financial Modeler's Hippocratic Oath. It says, I will remember that I didn't make the world and it doesn't satisfy my equations. Although I will use models boldly to estimate value, I will not be overly impressed by mathematics. I will never sacrifice reality for elegance without explaining why I have done so, nor will I give the people who use my model false comfort about its accuracy. Instead, I will make explicit its assumptions and oversights. I understand that my work may have enormous effects on society and the economy, many of them beyond my comprehension.
Wow, I love that.
So I was so impressed. I teach derivatives and risk management. And at the end of my class, I typically cite this manifesto to kind of impart some wisdom from somebody who is a physicist, one of the most famous quants on Wall Street, but basically says math alone is not going to do the trick. So you have to understand the world a little better and understand the models and its assumptions and its flaws. So that's one big book that I would recommend, and the paper as well. I'm also a fan of Aswath Damodaran. I'm not sure if you know him. He's written numerous books and has hundreds of videos and spreadsheets and lots of free data. He has his entire courses online on YouTube that you can watch. So I'm a big fan of him as well. Podcasts. There's a lot of them as well. One of my favorites for finance is The Odd Lots with Tracy Alloway, Joe Weisenthal. I really like that. I also recently listened to Dimitri Bianco and then recognized there was an interview I did with you that was really cool as well. But I also listened to other stuff. Like I like soccer. One of my favorite podcasts is Football Weekly from the UK. Talks about the English Premier League, and I really like that as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of those insights and resources for everyone. For everyone here, this is why I follow Clemens on social media. He's one of my favorite people to hear about all the books he's reading, but then he's like social enough to be able to post about it and share all of his resources and all of his lessons learned from those books on LinkedIn and beyond. And so, yes, thank you so much, Clemens, for being here and tuning, and for everyone else for tuning in. Really looking forward to what's to come, and Clemens, looking forward to continuing to follow your journey.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Take care.
You too.